I will sing alone for a moment. This is a chant that I learned recently from a friend in the Kansas City area who has Cherokee heritage and does a lot of multicultural studies and works with indigenous song and dance of many cultures. And this is a call to the elements, and in many, many native cultures, calling to the elements and the directions was a way of connecting to the one. And in the springtime, this was nice for me. And it goes like this. Fire, fire, air, air, water, water, earth, earth. Fire, fire, air, air, water, water, earth, earth. Micadilly, micadilly, oh, micadilly, micadilly, oh. Eagle flying free. As we stand in the light of the one, we know we are noble creatures. What I'd like to share with you now is called a universal greeting, and I learned this from another friend who's currently in Ireland, and I was taught this same set of movements by another friend. So I learned this from both a man and a woman who both work with multicultural songs and movements, and it goes like this. I'll say one line, and then I'd like you to repeat after me. I offer you love.
I offer you love.
I offer you friendship.
I offer you friendship.
I see your beauty.
I see your beauty.
I hear your needs.
I hear your needs.
I feel your feelings.
I feel your feelings.
I offer you friendship.
I offer you friendship.
Let us work together in peace.
Let us work together in peace.
Thank you.
Thank you, Annie Noah from Plumcrest Farm in Ely, Iowa. Beautiful, thank you. Good evening, August folks, in June. Tonight, we're coming together for the first time around a new picture, and it is about the Earth as it is and as it will be, simply moving into a time called the Ecozoic or the ecological age. My name is John Shumaker, and we're going to start tonight with the circle prayer with Annie, and then from there, a poem that I wrote for the Bioregional Congress. Some of the terminology in the poem may not be well understood. It's basically American Indian languages of sacred names for Mother Earth in Turtle Island or North America. So please bear with me. It's going to be a chant as well. This was first written at Leelanau Peninsula and the southern peninsula of Michigan, on the west coast of Michigan, as they call it, but the east coast of Lake Michigan. So Michigan is called Jigading in Odawa language. So this is a chant. Hold on to your ears. Gaia! Gaia moves in her creation dance in sidereal time. We are star people. We are cartwheeling across the universe. Encapsulated in the mothership of the neocortex, we are new earth, new time. Gaia, homo ludens, homo novus. We are new beginning, we are noetics. We are at new beginning, we are here. We are consciousness of itself in its complexity and equally in its complementarity. as well as in connectedness. We are convergence. We are serious, celebrating and welcoming us home with opening arms in the womb of our true home, the cosmic ocean. We are planetary child arising, the person of our planet. We are many minds becoming one mind. Arising as daughter, awakening, rubbing away her coyote tears, dreaming the dream. In her dawning, Gaia child dances the universe, twirling, whirling, spinning, sparking, the cosmogony of her dream alive. She unfurls it, now nebula, now nova, now galaxy. Spinning, 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 she whirls it alive. Galaxies run through her hands like beads. Gaia, Origen rising, Rigel smiling, whirling. She runs a ribbon through the heart of silence. A mead of pasture in the moss, on the common green, in the fogs and fens. Through the stone, her eyes smile blue. She is the diamond-jeweled ornament. She is liberation. Etain and Druidic dance emerges at Stonehenge. Magdalene sweeps clean. Mary, Marta, Margot, Columba gather. Ethiopia waits. Ursa Major points towards Polaris, the great bare space. Alaska moves in Beringia, dips toward Antarctica. The Seven Sisters aloft, sprung skyward from Grand Teton Medicine Wheel, with bear claws for marks on its petrified stump. The Kiowa kiss Taimei for the sun gift, the sacred bundle. The house made of dawn. In mythopoesis, the carriers of Skan, hey hechetu, mea heun. Here, her in the center. Alcyon's tsunami is silent. Amchitka talks. Talkeetna listens. Tualatin hears. Katua responds, hey yung yung. They hear owl call their name. Crane calls, walking to here. Cattail wails. Coyote smiles. Trust, trust, trust. Big wind moves Untagila bones through badlands. Lakota warn of Iktomi. Indian ones breathe an ipi to grandfather's spirit, saying, look for Uipi lights, making ties that bind. Sweat Lodge sings north to wisdom. White buffalo woman comes. Kush Canticles council pole at Morning Star in the east door. Red Cedar Center. Beaver People Congress for Turtle Island. Lilinau sings joy at dawning. The Cloud House says, Lou Welch is found by vultures alive. Ho! Gaia shines. In this touching, the breathing shields sing, Hiyama Vihio, Hiyama Vihio, Hiyama Vihio, Mia Heun. This was written in the Lilinau Peninsula, August of 1986, actually, the great second gathering of the Bioregional Congress. An invocation to Gaia, basically the beginning of the ecological age. So I thank everyone who's come on this short notice. And tonight we're going to talk about what's called a new law. And this new law is simply land, air, and water. And land, air, and water has become a precious commodity on Mother Earth simply because our geopolitical makeup is causing many of our resources to draw down. So this is a new law for the planet. It's simply land, air, and water. to replace the old codified laws of human-centered or anthropocentric-centered thinking. Now we're called to open our eyes to the larger picture, which is ecocentric or ecosystem thinking, thinking for the four-leggeds, the two-leggeds, the winged ones, the water, the air, the land, the biota, the flora, the fauna, all have place in this larger Congress, what we call the Bioregional Congress, where we legislate for nature. And Mother Earth is saying, we have a window here probably of 15 years at the max. And this is not scare tactics, it's just simply saying we're at a place where we are the guardians and the caretakers for the next 7 generations. And as we shift into ecocentric thinking, we will move beyond this narrow bottleneck we're in. But it's an invitation to a larger dance, a rising of the feminine as well as the wing of humanity, beginning to come together to fly. Not as a planet that is based on technology of the West or a gravitational field of Newton or a mechanical mindset that suggests that everything we solve is in terms of linear time. We're talking about simply a shift in time from a Gregorian calendar and a 12-month linear thinking and a money-based economy into a time of the planet as an art whole, that art is the measure of our life and not quanta. So I'm going to cover some details, and excuse this card stuff, but it's part of the reminders of where we're at. In the watershed depletion, there's a term called we all live downstream, and that means that in one sense or another, as we're all downstreamers, simply we would like to see the major artery of the planet on this Turtle Island, the Mississippi River, be cleaned up by the year 2010 at the latest. For empowerment in the community, there will be a group gathering for a walk in '96. They will start at the headwaters up there at Lake Itasca and walk all the way down the Mississippi River. And that will be called the Great River Walk. And a group over at Peace Retreat Farm over at Galena, their name is Mrs. Hippie and Born Again Hippie, better known as Frida Weiss and Martin Sickler. They're going to start this walk. It's getting a lot of good reports from the west and east coast, and this walk will begin in '96, and it will just simply go down the river and say, each little portion along the way we need to clean up. Whatever it's Monsanto, whether it's nuclear power plants, whether it's farm runoff, whether it's chemical direct pollution, or whatever else we have. This will be a walk simply to shift consciousness. But we don't have to wait for that. One of the things we can do locally is that we're all members of the Cedar River Watershed, is to join this little group that we're beginning to call Cedar River Revival. And what we would like to do is simply introduce legislation, being that that's one of the ways to get things done, to create the Cedar River Watershed as a scenic river waterway with no site source pollution in any of the communities along the way. That means Cedar Falls, Cedar Waterloo, Cedar Rapids, Charles City, all up and down the river where a good third to half of the eastern Iowa population lives. There is already common law set up to do this. Primarily, last year, little known to many people, the Wapsipinicon River became a scenic river waterway protected by the state of Iowa. The whole river from site to source is now a scenic river waterway. And all of it is within the state of Iowa, as we call it this. So what we'd like to do is simply shift that over one river, so to speak, one valley, and do the same thing for the Cedar River, which is where we live. There are some details on this. Right now it looks like what we have is gridlock in the legislature simply because somehow people are afraid to move, or the powers that be are smothering anything to come out of committee. So what this may end up to be 2000 project, but to begin now is to begin with sharing the consciousness of it. Simply call it the Cedar River Revival. Locally in Cedar Falls, and I'm sure in Cedar Rapids, there's a Cedar River Festival. Now we want to link up and simply say the whole river is our home backyard. So the ecological age simply suggests that geopolitical mind maps don't exist anymore. Our community is laced with Watershed. So Watershed is literally what communicates to us. And that's the water portion of the law. The airshed depletion is another form that's quite serious in some ways. There's a group called the Downwinders, who are a global phenomena, a term that just kind of hit orbit about 2 or 3 years ago. And we're talking about everyone who's ever been involved in nuclear testing or nuclear power plants or radioactive fallout. That's primarily around nuclear test sites, but by extension, the whole planet through the airshed. It's not well known that the nuclear power industry basically set up nuclear power and was telling people that it was for clean, efficient fuel, but primarily it was for plutonium extraction to create nuclear weapons. And a lot of these are now bucket bolt kind of things and are pretty obsolete. But the nuclear industry is now deciding to make another push and saying, well, it's clean air. But what we have here is a phenomenon of a global Holocaust. Conservatively speaking, about 18 million people have died since World War II. Rosie Lee Bertels, in her book No Immediate Danger, conservatively suggests that 18 million have died, and more likely upwards of 30 million. And this can be avoided. We can do better than this. It's just simply part of the old complex that suggests that E equals mc squared is the formula we have to live by, which is what we all know is the theory of relativity. But the Earth and the ecological age says no, it's not the theory of relativity, it's the theory now of nothing. It's simply relatedness, which suggests that relatedness is that we don't live in the prison of the eternal present, but there are 3 dimensions beyond the ones we're living in that we can access to simply by jettisoning this gravitational field lock that we're in. The new theory that is being proposed, even if we want to do mathematics, is Bjorn Ortenheim in University of Uppsala, Sweden, is saying E equals mc to the 4th, which simply enters us into the galactic. And that means we move beyond the speed of light into the galactic ocean or into what's known as hyperspace. And that simply means that star travel is not too far away. It's simply a shift from the left brain to the right brain. And where we've been stuck in patriarchy and all of this for the last 5,000 years of history is indeed part of our global warming problem, as well as our airshed problem with the fallout. Simply that we're locked into a grid of duality, where the spirit and the mind and the body are not connected. And this is simply just a backdrop to historical thinking, which is linear. And 2 things happened here. We're talking about Descartes with this cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am, has split us in half. And the other part was a very little known thing, which Mercator did. And Mercator came along and laid down a grid on the planet, longitude and latitude. And what we failed to see was the planet is an alive, sentient being. And when Mercator did that, he objectified the planet and literally, in the old form of execution, drew and quartered the Earth. And that set up hectares, townships, sections, and all the grids that are laid down on the planet, as well as geopolitical mind maps, which then legitimized property ownership and legitimized colonialization of third world peoples and fourth world peoples, as well as any animal or plant, bird that lived in that particular hectare. So what he did was literally laid down a colonization right there on the planet through this decision that we can objectify the planet and control it. Those 2 things led up to and really created E equals mc squared and the H-bomb, or the A-bomb, because what they basically did was say, we can separate this out and we can continue to separate down into finer and finer things until we can split the atom, and the atom then gives us the nuclear age. At the same time that the nuclear age occurs, the same year as the discovery of LSD. So Hoffman discovers LSD in 45, and July 16th, in Alamogordo, the first A-bomb gets dropped. Also in 1945 is the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls. So it's an awesome time to move into. Literally, that was a moving from and basically fear-based, which is atom bombs, but also we've got these other things going on, which is expansion of consciousness into what we are now. So in one sense, airshed depletion is also an etheric term for exposure to beyond the ionosphere and into the galactic. Now, land is another story. Land itself is has been owned for so long that we haven't known what it is like to live without ownership of land. That's where the money culture comes in, and that's where this 12-month Gregorian calendar comes in. It's basically a banker's calendar, Monday to Friday, 8 to 5, and then the weekends. That kind of time construct is simply a political construct based on ownership of land and the money culture, which is 12 months, 60-minute hour. The planet time frame, which is a rhythmic time frame, is a 13-month dream spell kind of thing. Some folks know about this. Lunar calendar, which is in sync with the sidereal time, star time, stellar time, and telluric time, which is planet time. That suggests that we have 13 months, 28 days, with a one day extra, which would be called a Jubilee Day. And we're working on this calendar, and some know about this too. They're available. But this whole thing evolves around this calendar, the Cartesian mind split, and Mercator's drawing and quartering the planet, literally crucifying the Earth. And when we drop these nuclear weapons, and this is part of the airshed, but it goes into the belly of Mother Earth, goes into her womb. What happens, as the Shoshone people have told us, what happens is we first start with extraction of coal, which takes out the lungs of Mother Earth. Then we take out the oil, which is the fossil fuels, and that's the arteries of Mother Earth, the blood. And then we extract uranium, which is the brain, the mind. We do a global lobotomy, and then create plutonium, and then do these nuclear weapons things. That is like a lobotomy globally. And we've been in a spin since then. We haven't been able to think right simply because we've been in this nuclear craziness for like 50 years. So the part of the empowerment that we've come here tonight is that there is a bill in Congress that's being pushed right now, and I encourage everyone to call their congressperson. It's a comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty, and what we want to do is move it forward onto the front burner to get this passed by the end of this year. So I really urge everyone to communicate back home to get the comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty in law now, because next year is the signing, and what will happen is other countries, and this is not, they have just suggested that if we, the big nuclear club, can't get it together, they may have second thoughts about their signing a treaty of non-proliferation, which is their time to renew next year. So I really strongly urge everyone to work for a comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty now. Also, to support legislation that begins to unpack what the Department of Energy is just beginning to hint at, which is like 50 million documents of censored material about the downwinders and the phenomenon of people into the third generation now. There is pretty strong evidence that's not hitting the medical community that says that breast cancer among women and AIDS both are directly attributable to nuclear fallout. Both. And through the immune deficiency, people's immune systems are weakened with fallout. Over time, it creates a whole pool of genes, basically, that are weakened. And out of this comes immune deficiency syndrome, AIDS. And this is suggested that possibly is a cost of doing nuclear business, as well as the what we do to the earth, we do to our mother. What's is happening with breast cancer, the same thing. There's a direct connection that people are suggesting now. It's also suggested that, in some senses, that, you know, sex without love is not a cool thing. So that's just an aside, but that's love rules the planet. Venus is really connected here. And it looks like Pleiades has found another star for its home, which is our own sun is evidently part of Pleiades that we're discovering. So planet Earth has got these things happening, but at the same time underneath it is this rising up of consciousness, which suggests that even if the scientists are not necessarily coming forward with this, it's coming out of the people itself. And the people are saying recycling, recycling, recycling. In our community, we're kind of mandated to do it, but many communities are moving forward, Madison and many others. But simply recycling bottles, tin, we know what that's about. But also recycling means getting out of our cars and bicycling, recycling. In a sense, that's what it means. But bicycle consciousness is really cool too. So another question that we might have is what Alice Walker talks about, the third Holocaust on the planet. And that simply is that the concretization of the malls and the freeways and so forth is causing a planetary ecocide literally in our midst, and this is an unknown Holocaust. And that is not on people, yes it is in some ways, but primarily it's cutting out ecosystems and cutting out the bioshelters for living animals and species. They're endangered, but they're not covered. It's suggested that in this particular watershed, there has been studies by attorney Wally Taylor, who's told me that in Cedar Falls, he's got 28 boxes of evidence that have proven that this DOT that's bulldozed its way through here has violated all kinds of environmental laws on the DNR, the Environmental Protection Act has been violated at least 28 times, but simply he can't get anybody from this area to testify based on fear or something else. So I suggest that people even go forward on that and support Wally Taylor. He's in Cedar Rapids, and he's trying to get some things done environmentally here around our own watershed that's being paved over. We're going to swiftly move on. Universities, churches, and corporations, I've kind of clustered those together. It's important to check out university investment profiles to see if they're investing in companies or corporations that pollute on any level. And students can demand an accounting on that ecologically. And environmentally, check out how these corporations are treating indigenous peoples within the borders of what we call the United States. Churches can move toward disinvestment from companies that pollute, just like in South Africa. We can do that with the churches. And support churches that are moving into socially responsible investing. And there's this possibility that we could ask the churches, as well as other entities, to tithe to the earth for legislation for treaty rights for indigenous peoples, as well as to begin to protect sacred places, which I'm really happy to announce that sacred places has become a United Nations issue, and there are now World Sacred Places parks, and one of the first is Mesa Verde. They're called World Cultural Parks, and it's a whole new consciousness expansion of sacred places into what we already know as national parks, but they're now called World Cultural Inheritance Parks. And instead of rangers and stuff, indigenous peoples will be doing the sharing of what goes on there, and it'll be their decision as to what they share. But they will be the ones kind of like making the decisions on these World Peace Parks. Another that was just announced is the Golden Gate, which is Presidio and Alcatraz. That's pretty cool. In corporations, it's simply, it's time for corporations to wake up and be part of the planet awakening and becoming responsible, both socially and culturally and environmentally. And I will mention here what Hazel Henderson has spoken about. There's not an economic pie, it's a cake. The top layer is the frosting, and the frosting is simply the private industry. The second layer is the public infrastructure, the schools, so forth, that are publicly funded. The third is what happens at home. All that interaction that doesn't get covered economically, no one pays it, but there's a whole lot of interchanges, domestic economy, that doesn't get any pay for that. And then underneath that is the third layer, which is the earth itself. So one of the questions we want to ask in entering the ecological age is, what is the cost to that domestic layer of the economy, and what is the cost to the earth itself and anything we extract from it? We want to add on those two layers of the cake that really drive this economy, with the unspoken layers, the domestic economy and the earth, that which is matter, that which is mother. What is the cost to the Mother Earth, and what is the cost to the domestic economy, and hidden costs such as socially, violence, abuse, drugs, corrections, all of that. And since 1969, we've had an 800% increase in corrections monies, and a 25% decrease in money for education. I suggest that making more jails is not the answer. In fact, it's one of the cruelest things to have as a social band-aid. It certainly doesn't act as an antidote. It certainly is questionable as to how long we can pour concrete into jails and corrections as the answer to our real needs to connect to the earth and re-spiritualize our connection. So some of these things that the corporations are, the hidden costs on that are simply the global market economy comes out to being global planet, ecocide, and global human slavery. And the NAFTA, the day that it was instituted down in Mexico City, or in Mexico, was the arrival and the emergence of the Mayan people and the Zapatista movement, which is an uprising for land rights, the same day. So if there's radio silence out there, it's simply not because there isn't resistance. It's just simply that all the forms of media are controlled by major corporations. KGAN is Gannett. The Waterloo Courier is Gannett. The Des Moines Register is Gannett. I don't know how we pronounce it, but it's like a octopus on access. I might add just simply that there would be a lot more people here if the local Gannett newspaper would have broadcast or publicized this event, and they refused to. So you can see from there that they don't want to get the word out too much. So there are some antidotes to this. Public radio, as bad as it is, still has some pretty good programs. One of which is New Dimensions Radio, WSUI in Iowa City, Hearts of Space, Echoes, Studs Terkel, Horizons, San Francisco City Lights, and on it goes. I mean, there's like Sounds True, Sounds Print, Soundprint, Access, and there's another one called The Environmental Show, and Earthwatch. But the best one that I know is called Radio for Peace International. And to get this, you got to get a shortwave radio. And on there they have Feminist International Radio Endeavor, Vietnam Veterans Radio Network, Bread Not Bombs, New Dimensions, and a whole slew of pirate radio stations that are simply putting out what's happening. And I really encourage everyone to get a shortwave radio, $40, $35, $50, $100, and start tuning in to Radio for Peace International. It is simply the people's planetary radio. And other than that, we could talk more about corporations, but I don't think we want to. In the sense that Hiroshima and Alcatraz kind of shares some kind of Pacific Rim consciousness, and it's kind of interesting on that. Hiroshima is coming up again. There's going to be a 50th anniversary of Hiroshima in 1995. In that time, and I'm going to read just a little bit from this, there's going to be a gathering. This is another form of empowerment, and this is just kind of like a state of what's happening right at this moment in terms of timeline. And I'm just going to run it down. In This would lead up to the August 4th of 95. And August 4th of 94, at the nuclear test site, there's going to be the 49th anniversary. Then there would be a call to the desert by the Shoshone people. Corbin Harney, the medicine man there, is initiating this. He's a spiritual elder, and is calling for others to come together with the Shoshone National Council to honor Indigenous Peoples Treaty, which is treaty rights, Treaty of Ruby Valley, but all other Indigenous peoples. Then there will be a Walk in the Ways of Peace concert in Phoenix in November, and that will be Claudia Peterson, Jesse Manabusam, and other folks who are singing and have an evening of education. What does this lead up to? This leads up to what's called a Walk in the Ways of Peace concert again in Albuquerque, a Time in the Desert next year, a Walk for Peace. This is the one that people might want to tune into. It's Las Vegas to the nuclear test site, and it's a 6-day journey to the test site, and will draw attention to the Non-Proliferation Treaty Review Conference and International Citizens Assembly occurring in New York, and will raise funds for these events. Simply put, we have a real opportunity to rid the planet of nuclear in all of its forms forever in this little scenario here. Specifically nuclear testing, but also nuclear power behind this. We get a nuclear powered, a comprehensive nuclear test ban treaty in effect, we'll move on that. And then there will be an atomic mirror pilgrimage, remembrance, repentance, and renewal, retracing the route of the first A-bomb. That will be July 21st of 95, in preparation for the August 4th to August 9th gathering of the 50th anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which simply will talk about the A-bombs and the 1,000 U.S. nuclear blasts, but we'll be remembering the past and the future victims of these first 50 years. But also, I would put that we might say that not only just the past and remember the past, but say, seal that off and have a celebration of that being the ending of the nuclear weapons age. We could do it. We have less than a year, and we can do it. We can actually call an end to the nuclear craziness. What simply is the last step before we move on to galactic consciousness. We remove nuclear from the planet. It gives us, like, remove the Martians, you know? It removes that kind of consciousness that drives these weapons labs and so forth, including Collins Rockwell, which is doing Star Wars craziness. And it removes that and gives people a better chance to have a decent living for themselves and feel so less violent. Takes a lot of the violence out of males as well. Permission to not think nuclear thoughts. Okay, I'm going to say that basically what I'm laying out here tonight is a few terms, and this is what was called the Magna Carta. Happened in 1050 something. That's about 1,000 years ago. And what I'm saying here tonight is simply that we're calling for what's called a Geo-Magna Carta, not only just for the rights of humankind, but now the rights for the living earth itself, the Geo-Magna Carta, and beginning to see the planet as one. Left hemisphere, right hemisphere, western, eastern, occidental, oriental, we are one. And it's essential that we embrace this Magna Carta of the earth, simply because it's too beautiful a place to think any smaller than that. So this beautiful biotic web that we live in, this dome, planetary structure of light, is also a time of assembling greater consciousness about matter turning into light, photosynthesis, photon consciousness. Literally, matter is sentient. We awaken to that. We awaken to the song of the whales and the dolphins and the sea turtles and the spotted owl. We hear their cry. Now we can begin to think about the carbon, preserving the forests, doing away with fossil fuel generated motor vehicles. This we have to begin to seriously question because of our love not only for the planet but the future of this planet and all beings in it. So we have a biodiversity time here, which literally says biodiversity is simply unity in diversity, which is the divine plan. And that also is co-equal with cultural diversity. That suggests that 4,000 different indigenous folks and their cultures deserve sovereignty and protection and need this. There is a Hopi message, and the Hopi, we know, talked about the four worlds before, and this is the fifth world we're moving into, this flowering of the sixth sun even, but they simply give us a little time and a little time more and a little time more. It's not to scare anyone, because it isn't a scary time. It's a wonderful time of opportunity to be alive here. But I'm simply putting out a call to move into an ecological time, an ecozoic time. It's simply not physical anymore. It's spiritual and metaphysical. And I'm going to just kind of leave it at that and suggest that we change our curricula into what we would call an all-species curricula. And if there's any questions and stuff, we can go into that.
John, I know you've done a lot of work with the downwinders. Do you see anything happening in terms of help for the people who have been damaged by the pollution in the air from the nuclear test site? Is anything happening on that front?
There was a bill passed Congress in November of '91 giving like $100 million, which is just chicken feed, to the survivors. I talked with Anthony Goriska, who's the chair of the Atomic Veterans, and they suggest what they did with Vietnam veterans, and this includes Vietnam veterans, was just basically blood money. But when we get into the real cleanup, Sandra, this is gonna what we have to do is begin to really pay damages. And it's not just the cleanup of the soil, but the people's minds, hearts, and lives. And it may take hundreds of billions of dollars. And this may be the biggest blind spot driving backwards with mirrors that this country's going in. It wants to talk about global markets and all this. We've got 50 years of a carnage that's unprecedented in human history. In our own country, we've had 1,000 nuclear bombs go off in Nevada. We've had a nuclear war in this country that's never been reported by any of the media. Like 12 bombs a year for 50 years, you know? I mean, it's more than 1,000. And that's just U.S. And we also hear that Chernobyl, instead of a 3% meltdown, that's what was reported. What was really happened there was an 80% meltdown. And hundreds of thousands of lives were taken. They call it a mortality wave, swept the Soviet Union. This thing hasn't been reported. What I can say is that Terry Tempest Williams and the Mormon women and the downwinders are suing the government. They said, I'm quoting one of the women, she said, you know, it's hard to say what the price of a human life is. They had a class action suit and they got $100 million. And out of that, each family gets like $1,200 or $1,800. And she said, what's the price of a human life? What's the worth of this? And we look at, in a sense, the Dark Lords running Las Vegas and the stealth bomber and the test site and the bombing range out there. And they're saying simply, don't worry, there is no danger. There is no danger. And now the Department of Energy, our own government, says there have been 50 million documents that have been censored for the last 50 years. I mean, if this isn't akin to some Nazi warlike experiments, I don't know what is. It really frightens me that the people of this country won't speak up and say something against this. I mean, the good Germans are no different than the good Americans who don't speak out. Silence is complicity. We do have to speak out. I mean, otherwise we're just giving, you know. And this, now that it's coming out, we're finding more and more, and it becomes almost, it's scary. I mean, it becomes the whole state of Utah. It's kind of like, you know, a sacrifice zone. Same with Nevada. It's just out of the sight, out of mind. The great population center of the East are not involved. Therefore, they figured there won't be any resistance. Well, also, when the wind was blowing toward California and Southern California, no nuclear bombs went off that day. Only when the winds went upwind, northeast, would they drop the bomb. And they would only do that simply because they know there would be a lot of protest in California. But the Mormons followed authority. Anyone who follows authority and doesn't ask questions, this is what happens. I'm really, really sorry for all these people. And I don't know. Some good friends along the way have died. I mean, it's close. Yeah. That's part of the big thing is women's rights equals planet rights. And cleanup of the planet involves honoring women and the sacredness of everything about life. And that's the womb and everything about it. And this global catastrophe is really a carnage, a crime against Mother Earth and a crime against women. There's a brother here, and I think he wants to ask a question.
Well, also during all this testing and whatever, and they do not bring up the fat that is going in the water tables underneath the ground, which also gives us the water for our livestock and our grain. And eventually, the radiation will show up there. But how long before they wake up to this?
When I was at the nuclear test site, I've been out there so many times, it feels like I'm only away from there. It's kind of like what kind of headspace you get in sometimes. But the people from San Diego said that they were having reports that they didn't care about nuclear testing and all that, but they were concerned about their water, and it was getting into the groundwater, and they were saying their fears that it's not necessarily corroborated, but they had fears that it was getting into the Colorado River Basin, leaching down deep into that aquifer, and that they were concerned very much that it was showing up in the San Diego drinking water. Not to be proven, it hasn't been, but that was people have a wisdom and a common wisdom that science can never tap into, even what. And these people coming out were saying, we're concerned about the drinking water. It's just another voice in the wilderness saying, there's something really wrong here. The planet's been in a downward spiral. Let's pull it out, you know. I mean, let's flutter the wings and start rising.